A Hollywood director called John Wayne a fake American and draft dodger in front of the entire industry. Wayne said nothing. His revenge took 20 years. Subscribe to discover the untold moments when Hollywood's biggest legends revealed their true character away from the cameras. Hit that like button if you believe actions speak louder than words. What would you have done if someone publicly questioned your patriotism and integrity? Share your thoughts below. If you are ready, let me begin. The crystal chandelier cast warm light across the Beverly Hills Hotel's dining room mid-October evening in 1951. The premiere of Wayne's latest Western had ended 2 hours earlier, and Hollywood's elite had gathered for the traditional after-party celebration. Laughter mixed with the gentle clinking of champagne glasses and the soft murmur of industry gossip being exchanged over perfectly prepared steaks. Vincent Morrison sat at table 12, nursing his third martini and watching John Wayne with growing irritation. Morrison was 38, at the peak of his creative powers, and widely regarded as Hollywood's most intellectually rigorous director. His films challenged audiences, questioned authority, and earned him the respect of critics, who dismissed most Hollywood productions as empty entertainment. 3 consecutive Academy Award nominations had elevated him from promising talent to cultural force. Morrison's latest film, a searing indictment of corporate war profiteering, had just opened to rave reviews in New York. The critics called it unflinching and morally necessary. Morrison believed he was making art that mattered, stories that served truth rather than profit. John Wayne sat 2 tables away with his wife Esperanza and their children, quietly celebrating another box office success. At 44, Wayne had become America's most recognizable movie star. His westerns consistently ranked among the year's biggest hits, and his image was synonymous with frontier courage and patriotic duty. Children played cowboys and Indians pretending to be him. Veterans praised his portrayals of military heroes. Politicians referenced his characters in speeches about American values. But to Morrison, Wayne represented everything corrupt about Hollywood's relationship with power. Here was a man who had built a career playing soldiers and patriots while staying safely in Hollywood during the war. Morrison had served in the Pacific Theater as a documentary filmmaker, capturing the real horror and heroism that Wayne only imitated on sound stages. The alcohol had loosened Morrison's customary restraint. He'd been watching Wayne all evening, growing increasingly disgusted by what he saw as the celebration of a manufactured hero. The way people approached Wayne's table with reverence. The way Wayne's children looked at their father with obvious pride. The way Wayne carried himself with quiet authority, as if he'd actually earned the respect he commanded. Morrison pushed back his chair and stood. The movement was deliberate, designed to draw attention. Conversations at nearby tables paused. Several people turned to look at the celebrated director who seemed about to make an impromptu speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison announced, his cultured voice carrying clearly across the restaurant. He raised his martini glass, the gesture formal and precise. "I'd like to propose a toast to all the real Americans in this room. The ones who actually served their country when it mattered most." The atmosphere shifted instantly, like air pressure dropping before a storm. Silverware stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Everyone in the restaurant understood that this wasn't a general tribute to veterans. The target was obvious, unmistakable, and sitting 12 feet away. Wayne looked up from cutting his steak. His movement was slow, controlled. His blue eyes found Morrison's face and held the gaze steadily. Wayne's expression remained completely neutral, but something fundamental changed behind his eyes. A door closing, a decision being made. He set down his knife and fork with deliberate precision but said nothing. Esperanza Wayne's hand moved instinctively toward her husband's arm, then stopped. She knew better than to intervene. The Wayne children, ranging from 8 to 16, sensed the sudden tension without fully understanding its source. The eldest, Michael, looked between his father and the stranger who seemed to be challenging him. "Not everyone here earned their patriotic reputation in uniform," Morrison continued, his voice gaining strength from Wayne's silence. "Some of us stayed home during the war. building careers while real Americans fought and died. Some of us learned to play soldiers so convincingly that people forget we never were them. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Morrison had struck directly at Wayne's most vulnerable point. The war years had been agonizing for Wayne, classified 3. A deferred due to his age, 4 children, and financial responsibilities. He'd watched friends and contemporaries go overseas while he remained in Hollywood making movies. He'd applied several times for military service, only to be told that his draft board considered him more valuable making films that boosted civilian morale. The decision had tormented Wayne for years. He'd seen the looks, heard the whispered comments about Hollywood heroes who played tough guys, while real tough guys died on foreign beaches. Every war film he made carried the weight of that private shame. Every veteran he met reminded him of service he'd never given. And now Vincent Morrison was making that private torture public in front of Wayne's industry peers, his wife, and his children. Still, Wayne said nothing. Morrison, emboldened by Wayne's silence and the rapt attention of the room, pressed his advantage. It is fascinating how Hollywood creates heroes, isn't it? How we transform someone who avoided service into America's symbol of military courage. But I suppose that is just effective marketing. The word avoided hung in the air like an accusation of cowardice. Morrison had chosen his language carefully, not deferred, which suggested bureaucratic process, but avoided, which implied personal choice and moral failing. Wayne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His hands remained flat on the white tablecloth, completely still. Several people at nearby tables were staring openly now, waiting for the explosion that never came. This was John Wayne, the toughest man in movies, being publicly called a coward and a fraud. Where was the righteous anger? Where was the confrontation? Wayne said nothing. Morrison returned to his seat, clearly satisfied with his performance. He'd accomplished what he'd set out to do. Expose what he saw as the fundamental hypocrisy of American cinema's most celebrated tough guy. The restaurant slowly began returning to normal conversation, but the damage was irreversible. John Wayne had been humiliated in front of Hollywood's elite, and his failure to respond would be interpreted as admission of guilt. Esperanza leaned close to her husband. "John," she whispered, "are you all right?" Wayne nodded once, his eyes still focused on his plate. "We'll finish dinner," he said quietly. "Then we'll go home." The meal continued in strained silence. Wayne's children, confused and embarrassed by the public attack on their father, picked at their food without speaking. Other diners occasionally glanced toward Wayne's table, some with sympathy, others with the cruel satisfaction people feel when witnessing the downfall of someone more successful than themselves. When Wayne finally stood to leave, Morrison was still holding court at his table, regaling friends with observations about Hollywood mythology and manufactured heroism. Wayne walked past Morrison's table without looking in his direction, his family following behind like a funeral procession. The story exploded across Hollywood within hours. By morning, every gossip columnist in Los Angeles had some version of the incident. Director challenges Wayne's war record at Beverly Hills Hotel. Hollywood's patriot stays silent under attack. Morrison questions Wayne's military service. The narrative wrote itself. John Wayne, the man who had made millions playing America's greatest heroes, couldn't defend his own honor when it mattered. The tough guy was revealed as a coward who folded under pressure. The patriot was exposed as a fraud who'd built his reputation on others' sacrifice. Morrison began granting interviews, carefully avoiding direct mentions of Wayne while making his meaning unmistakably clear. Some actors have become so associated with military roles that audiences forget they never earned the moral authority to play them. He told the Los Angeles Times, "True courage isn't learned on a soundstage or developed through rehearsal. It is tested under fire." When Variety asked Morrison about the responsibility of artists to address uncomfortable truths, his response was pointed. "If we allow profitable myths to substitute for honest storytelling, we become accomplices in a national deception." American audiences deserve to distinguish between real heroes and manufactured ones. Wayne maintained his silence. When reporters cornered him outside Republic Studios, his responses were brief and controlled. "I don't discuss other people's opinions about me." When pressed specifically about Morrison's comments regarding his war service, Wayne's answer was barely audible. "My service to my country is between me and my conscience." This restraint only encouraged Morrison's attacks. In a lengthy interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Morrison became more explicit. "John Wayne has built an empire playing the kind of men who actually served in uniform while he remained safely in Hollywood. It is not just hypocrisy. It is a profitable exploitation of genuine sacrifice. Every dollar he has earned from war movies is money made from other men's courage." Hollywood began choosing sides. Progressive directors and actors rallied around Morrison, praising his courage in confronting what they saw as dangerous nationalism disguised as entertainment. Conservative stars and producers defended Wayne, arguing that Morrison's attacks were politically motivated and personally cruel. But Wayne remained conspicuously absent from the debate about himself. He attended premieres, fulfilled promotional obligations, and continued making movies as if nothing had changed. When forced to appear at industry events where Morrison was present, Wayne was cordial but distant. If Morrison entered a room, Wayne would nod politely and continue his conversations. Morrison's career, meanwhile, reached new heights. His next film, a devastating portrait of military contractors, profiting from soldiers' deaths, earned him another Oscar nomination. At the 1953 Academy Awards ceremony, Morrison's acceptance speech included what everyone recognized as another reference to Wayne. "This award belongs to everyone who believes art should serve truth rather than comfortable lies or profitable myths." Wayne attended that ceremony. When Morrison's category was announced and the nominees were read, Wayne applauded with appropriate enthusiasm. When Morrison won, Wayne stood with the rest of the audience and clapped steadily. When Morrison delivered his pointed acceptance speech, Wayne's expression never changed from polite attention. After the ceremony, reporters surrounded Wayne demanding his reaction to Morrison's latest comments. Wayne's response was characteristic. "I congratulate Mr. Morrison on his award. His work clearly resonates with the Academy, and I respect their judgment." But behind the public restraint, something had fundamentally shifted. Wayne began making discreet inquiries about Morrison's projects. Not directly, which would have been obvious and crude, but through the elaborate network of agents, producers, and studio executives who comprised Hollywood's power structure. Wayne would mention casually to a producer friend that he was curious about Morrison's next picture. He'd ask his agent whether Morrison was being considered for projects Wayne might want. He'd inquire seemingly innocently about scripts Morrison was reading or meetings he was taking. Wayne never said anything explicitly negative about Morrison. He never criticized Morrison's films or politics. He never responded publicly to the attacks on his character. But word began spreading through Hollywood's interconnected web of relationships. John Wayne was paying attention to Vincent Morrison's career with interest that seemed less than friendly. The effect was subtle, but unmistakable. Studio heads who had previously competed for Morrison's services began taking longer to return his calls. Projects that had seemed certain began stalling in development limbo. Scripts stopped arriving at Morrison's agent's office with the same frequency. Morrison initially attributed these changes to the broader political climate. McCarthyism was affecting many left-wing artists, and Hollywood's blacklist was expanding beyond just screenwriters to include directors and actors with progressive sympathies. Morrison assumed his troubles were part of that systematic persecution. He had no idea that John Wayne, the man he'd publicly humiliated, was quietly using his enormous influence to make Morrison's professional life increasingly difficult. Wayne never issued ultimatums or made demands. He simply made it clear, in subtle ways that preserved plausible deniability, that he noticed who supported his detractors and remembered who showed him loyalty. Studio executives who wanted Wayne for their pictures began to understand that hiring Morrison might complicate their relationship with Hollywood's most bankable star. Producers who depended on Wayne's box office appeal started questioning whether Morrison's artistic vision was worth risking their access to guaranteed profits. By 1955, Morrison's phone had virtually stopped ringing. His agent was having difficulty getting him meetings. Scripts weren't being submitted for his consideration. His career, which had seemed unstoppable just 2 years earlier, had mysteriously and completely stalled. Desperate and confused, Morrison began reaching out to contacts throughout the industry, trying to understand what had changed so dramatically and so quickly. Slowly, carefully, through whispered conversations and reluctant admissions, the truth emerged. John Wayne hadn't destroyed Morrison's career through any dramatic confrontation or public retaliation. He'd simply made it clear, through 1,000 small signals and quiet conversations, that loyalty was rewarded in Hollywood, and betrayal was neither forgotten nor forgiven. The industry had made its choice, and that choice was John Wayne. Morrison tried frantically to restart his career. He moved to New York, attempting to work in television and independent films. He wrote articles for progressive magazines, taught film courses at small colleges, and took whatever directing work he could find. But his Hollywood career was finished forever. The man who had publicly humiliated John Wayne in 1951 had been quietly, methodically, and completely removed from the industry by 1956. Wayne never spoke about Morrison again. When reporters occasionally asked about their old conflict, Wayne would respond with genuine, seeming confusion. "I don't recall that situation," or "that is ancient history that doesn't interest me." He moved forward to the greatest successes of his career. The Quiet Man, The Searchers, Rio Bravo, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. His box office power grew exponentially. His cultural influence expanded beyond movies into politics and social issues, and his status as American cinema's most reliable and powerful star became absolutely unshakable. Vincent Morrison disappeared completely into obscurity. By the early 1960s, most people had forgotten he'd ever existed. His films, once celebrated and discussed, were rarely shown and never mentioned. His name appeared only in comprehensive film history books, usually as a brief footnote about political persecution during Hollywood's blacklist era. 20 years passed like seasons changing. In October 1971, John Wayne was attending a small film festival in Santa Barbara, dedicated to celebrating Western movies, when he encountered a startlingly familiar face in the hotel lobby. Vincent Morrison, now 68, and looking every day of it, was working as a freelance script doctor for low-budget productions. He looked older, grayer, diminished from the confident director who had once commanded respect and fear at industry gatherings. Morrison recognized Wayne immediately, and for several frozen moments, both men stood motionless, separated by 2 decades of silence, consequence, and the ruins of one man's career. Morrison's face showed immediate recognition not just of Wayne, but of what his 1951 attack had ultimately cost him. Wayne's expression revealed nothing beyond mild surprise at an unexpected encounter. Morrison approached slowly, almost reluctantly, as if walking toward his own execution. "Mr. Wayne," he said quietly, his once commanding voice now tentative and aged. "I wonder if I might have a word with you." Wayne nodded once, a gesture that somehow conveyed both permission and wariness. They moved together to a corner of the lobby where they could speak privately, away from the festival attendees and casual observers who might recognize either man. Morrison seemed to gather himself before speaking, like an actor preparing for a difficult scene. "I want you to know," he said carefully, "that I've had 20 years to think about that night at the Beverly Hills Hotel. 20 years to understand what I did and why I did it. I was wrong to attack you publicly like that. I was wrong about many things." Wayne listened without interrupting, his face as impassive as it had been in countless westerns. "I know what happened to my career wasn't coincidence," Morrison continued, his voice gaining slight strength from confession. I know you had influence over the decisions that ended my time in Hollywood. I am not asking for your help now. I am not asking for forgiveness or a second chance. I just wanted to say that I understand why you did what you did, and I probably deserved exactly what I got." Wayne was quiet for a long moment, considering his response with the same careful deliberation that had characterized his behavior for 2 decades. When he finally spoke, his voice carried no anger, no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, just bone-deep weariness. "Vincent," Wayne said, using Morrison's first name with surprising familiarity, "I never set out to destroy anybody's career. I never wanted to hurt you personally. I just made it clear to people that actions have consequences. You chose to question my character and integrity in front of my family and my peers. I chose to remember that choice and act accordingly." "I understand that now," Morrison replied. "Do you really?" Wayne asked, leaning forward slightly. "Because this was never about politics or the war or your opinions about America or my military record. It was never about different views on art or entertainment or Hollywood's responsibilities. It was about basic human respect. You thought you could humiliate a man in front of his family and his professional community, and that there would be no price to pay for that kind of calculated cruelty." Morrison nodded slowly, accepting the judgment. "The thing is," Wayne continued, his voice growing softer, but somehow more intense, "I never wanted revenge on you, Vincent. Revenge is personal and emotional and usually stupid. What I wanted was accountability. I wanted you to understand that words and actions matter, especially when you have a platform and influence. I wanted the industry to understand that there are consequences for attacking people's character and dignity." They stood in silence for another moment, 2 old men processing decades of conflict and consequence. "Are you happy with how it turned out?" Morrison asked finally. Wayne considered the question with obvious care. "I sleep well at night," he said. "I treat people with respect and courtesy until they give me clear reason not to. I protect my family and my reputation because nobody else will do those things for me. I've had a good career and a good life. If that is happiness, then yes, I suppose I am happy." Morrison extended his hand with dignity that suggested he'd retained some measure of his former self. Wayne shook it once, firmly, with neither warmth nor coldness, then turned and walked away without another word. Vincent Morrison died in 1974, largely forgotten by the industry he'd once influenced, and completely absent from the cultural conversation he'd once dominated. John Wayne died in 1979, remembered and mourned as one of cinema's greatest stars and most influential cultural figures. Their brief encounter in Santa Barbara was never reported by the press, witnessed only by hotel staff, who didn't recognize its significance or understand the history being quietly resolved between 2 old men in a hotel lobby. But those few who knew both men and understood their history recognized that moment as representing something important about consequences, accountability, and the patient justice that powerful people can exercise when they choose strategic restraint over immediate retaliation. John Wayne never publicly celebrated Vincent Morrison's professional destruction. He never gloated about his enemy's downfall or took credit for the quiet campaign that had ended Morrison's career. He simply demonstrated over 20 patient years that character and reputation are built slowly over time and defended decisively when necessary. The lesson Morrison learned far too late to save himself wasn't about politics or patriotism or Hollywood power games. It was about understanding that public attacks on someone's fundamental integrity and dignity demand a response, and that response doesn't always have to be immediate or obvious to be completely effective. Sometimes the longest and most complete revenge is simply allowing someone to live with the full consequences of their own choices, while you continue building the life and career they tried to destroy.